Hello, everyone. Man, I cannot tell you how excited I am that we are back with AWS Connections. Hello, my name is Michael, and with me is.
Hey, I'm Vidhan Bhonsle, and I am telepay evangelist with here, and I'm based out of India.
It is so awesome to have you join with me. In fact, Vidhan, we have never done a Twitch episode before together. So, as we're going to be starting this new series and a sneak hint at another one soon to come, I think that it's good to kind of do a formal introduction of ourselves so people can get to know us because we're going to be paired up together for weeks and weeks doing these
Yeah.
AWS Connections episodes. So I would love to know, just give me a little bit about you, who you are, what your background is in the technology space.
Okay, so basically, I have a lot of experience on IoT, and I've been a trainer, a corporate trainer on IoT. I've trained a lot of people and companies on IoT, and I prefer working on open source technologies. I prefer, and I love Python as a programming language. Like
I
everybody knows
didn't,
that. Who
I
knows
didn't,
me?
I didn't know that. See, I didn't know that
Oh,
you love Python. I knew you loved IoT. I didn't know you loved Python. Good to know.
yeah, I do. A lot of my blogs are on Python. If you see it on the developer portal. And then I joined here last year, December, and now I'm here.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So, what
Yes.
about you? What is your background, Michael?
Well, I've been with the developer relations team at here for over 3 years. And prior to that, I was on I can't say it because every device will go off, but the voice technology at Amazon. So hopefully you know what I mean. I was with that team. And then prior to that, I worked at Microsoft. So enjoyed all of those journeys that led me to here, no pun intended. But you know what? You are actually very, what's the thing? Uh, you're not quite a year at Here Technologies yet. And if I recall correctly, we first met each other when I flew to India for the first time to Mumbai. And what was your status with our company at that time?
So basically, I was going to join on 11th of December, and the location where we met in November, and I had the offer, and I just wanted to meet the team. So Mithun asked me to come down and meet everybody, and that's how I came in contact. I met you all, and it was an amazing experience. I
Yeah.
remember meeting you, and you showed me some of the pictures that you clicked when you were moving around in Mumbai, and I
Oh
love that
yeah, yeah.
actually.
Those are fun pictures. First time to
Yeah.
Mumbai, first time to India, so it was nice to see that culture and obviously get to know who you were as well. And so I'm so glad you have been very busy. Probably, I would say some of our teammates, including myself, might say one of the busy, if not the busiest evangelist on the team. What have you been up to in the since you've joined?
So I've been working a lot on Python. I right now, if you talk about what I'm doing right now, so my major task is integrating new age technologies with our APIs, like IoT or blockchain or machine learning, AI. So that is what I'm working on, and we are having a series with IBM where we are integrating with their evangelists, and we are coming up with some new workshop or webinars every Tuesday. So that is what we are doing. And just to let you know, we recently created one of very amazing application where we click a picture of a food and then we pass it to the image recognition algorithm, and you attach the location to it. In that way, you'll be able to find out the restaurants or places who serve that food. So that is what I was working on, or I worked recently.
That's
So
cool.
yeah. So tell me, Michael, what have you been up to recently?
Well, Uh, one of the things this year that's been fun was getting really immersed into these office hours on Twitch. That's been really fun, and it's been even more exciting, or it was, let's say, challenging without Peter. Now, Peter is producing, or he is the man behind the scenes for this episode, which I'm so grateful for. But that was a challenging time to do all of those things at to both, host and also do all the behind the scenes stuff. That was pretty challenging. So I thought that was actually a great experience. It made me value the fact that if I have the option, I don't want to do that job. Uh, but at least I know all the complexities behind there, and also the creative intelligence that it takes to produce it, and not only that, but make it look good. That's where Peter really shines. Is he knows how to evolve everything to make it look good. So I'm so grateful for that. Also been dabbling a lot in just kind of what I would call raw location stuff. Like I want to get to the nitty gritty of points on a map and understanding. So a lot of the stuff that you've seen in if you've seen any of the home office hours episodes, has been just diving into some of those raw concepts of understanding location data as it relates to other things. So I've been up to that. But of course, Vidhan, the major project that I've been working on real recently has been supply chain. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's why I'm so excited for today. Let me tell you how excited I am for today. I'm so happy about today's episode that I'm already excited to do the next one. Like because today's episode is all going to be about architecture. It's going to be conceptual. We're not getting into any code at all, although you and I will have some tech discussions about some things architecturally. But then I can't wait for the next episode when it's going to be a code dive, right? But supply chain is really been at pretty much what on the forefront of my brain as of late.
So actually, supply chain is something that is quite interesting, and I want to learn. And for me, this will be a very good learning, hosting it with you. And apart from that, I would want to know or learn from your AWS experience and how you're going to play with AWS. I'm really excited to see that.
It's going to be fun, and I tell you what, I'm probably going to be just as excited to be your co-host when you are doing the whole series on IoT, because I would love to learn more about that too. So I think it's going to be a win-win for both of us. But for now, I guess, knowing that all of this was going to be architecture and concepts, it's going to be the first time ever that I'm bringing something to our live stream. And that is, I kind of put together a little presentation, but the presentation was basically to help us with the conceptual stuff. So if we could go ahead, Peter, and have that on the screen so we can chat. So as you could see, supply chain is what's being focused on the screen. But here's the thing, Vidhan, I've heard this term a lot, even in the news. I've heard it with all the things going on in the world. This term has been thrown around here and there. And so when I knew that I was going to be doing this particular project, I wanted to make sure and understand it like everybody else does. And so I had to look up a lot of information. And what I discovered is there is a lot of information about what this means. And it means different things according to different folks. But I want to give you one definition that I found that was the most succinct one from a dictionary that at least is a starting point for supply chain. And it reads this way: the sequence of processes involved in the production and distribution of a commodity. So
Wow.
that's a big, powerful,
Yeah.
one simple sentence to describe it. But of course, it can be a lot. It can be so many different things. So what I wanted to do was go through on the screen what I would call components of supply chain with this disclaimer. So here's the disclaimer. This is not a comprehensive list of supply chain components or all the processes involved. It simply is going to be a discussion point, especially how it relates to what we're going to be talking about in this series. So first of all, the first item up for bid is going to be the product or the service itself. And the reason why we say service is that in a supply chain, a service can be the product. That may sound interesting, but it can be. For example, there are remote services out there, such as like let's say I've learned recently, I might take this up, who knows, that there are dog groomers that can come over
Yeah.
to your place and take care of grooming your dog, which my type of dog that I just got will need eventually when he grows out of his puppy coat, right? But then there's also other types of services. In fact, at the core of the whole series that I'm doing, ultimately a service is at the core of everything. However, a product is also usually involved. And by product, we'll call it a thing or a widget, but it's whatever, where it's a tangible thing that goes from ultimately that ends up in the hands of the person who desires it, right? So we'll
So we can call
please.
it an asset, right?
An asset, yes, absolutely. Yeah, because ultimately, and what we're going to see is that supply chains are kind of like. Have you seen the movie Inception?
Yeah, I love that movie.
There was this phrase in Inception called "a dream within a dream." Well,
Yeah.
guess what? In supply chains, there can be a supply chain within a supply chain. And it can go levels deep, just like in the movie. So,
I have misused this dialogue many times in our meetings, actually.
well, So let me move to another component, which is kind of interesting. And I'm going to just call this company, right? And by company, it's kind of paired up with product or service, which means it's the company that is going to be the ultimate producer of this product or the service. So in supply chain definitions, or if you look up supply chain management or a whole bunch of process, it could be called a variety of things, but for our purposes, we're going to call it company. So if you have, can you think of a popular uh, brand of computer that you like?
Dell?
Dell. So
Yeah.
there's an example. So Dell would be a company. It provides you a product and or a service, right? So that's what we mean here by that. Then
Okay.
we have supplier. Now, the term supplier in this regard is really dealing with how the company, how they're going to go get what they need in order to produce the product or service. So it's the supplier to the company. Dell has to get their parts and pieces and all these things from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And the product that they're providing is not just shipped to them as if miraculous. I mean, it has to somehow, all these pieces, and that's why I said there could be a supply chain within a supply chain, because ultimately the supplier has their own supply chain to the company, right? To deliver these
So
parts and
they need to
pieces.
have some protocol or some way of making this thing work efficiently, right?
That's correct. Yes. So that's part of supply chain management, right? Is making sure that there is an efficiency there. And of course, when you do more of the research and study at this level, um, the impacts to that are just amazing. When prices decrease, it has an impact on this and that, and it even deals with inflation. So, but we're not going to go that deep into the process in these series. But I just wanted to provide the context, overall. So then there's this manufacturing, and you could say, isn't that the same as company? It's not always the same. It could be the same, but it's really where do things get assembled? Where do things get made? So you have to
Mhm.
manufacture stuff. And
So
yeah, please.
So when I think about manufacturing, and especially in today's world, I think about smart factories, where you have huge machineries connected with IoT devices, and they are in a way maintaining or calling shots in a way that if something goes wrong, they are able to detect it by themselves and so on. So yeah, that is something that I can connect with, since it is smart factories and since it is IoT.
Yes. And then kind of related to this, and maybe this might be relatable to you as well, are warehouses, right? So
Yeah.
this could be in the pre stages, like where do you store all the pieces and the parts, and it also could be the post stages of where do you store all the assembled things, right? So that's important.
So I read a very interesting case study regarding this, Michael. That when a company is deciding about the warehouses, the locations, what they do is they find out, they calculate the density of population of that area, and apart from that, there are many parameters like how many people, what buying or purchasing capabilities that those people have, how easily accessible these warehouses via the road, and how easy it is with the help of trucks, right? So, in a way, it uses fleet telematics. We can involve it here in
Yeah.
deciding the location of a warehouse or custom locations.
Now, keep in mind, some of these terms that I'm using could be what I would call overloaded or similar to some of the other terms. So I'm curious, I'm going to be asking you this when we get to this one term, if this also would apply to what you just said. But I'll get to that in a second. Transportation, obviously, with supply chain, this is critical. How do you get, whatever it is from here to there? And that's involved throughout the entire process. That's one of the most critical parts, is this whole, transporting, whether it's transporting from the supplier to the company, or it's, or the company to, either warehouses or other things that I'm about to reveal. Transportation is a very significant piece of supply chain.
Yes, basically, transportation is the only part where your asset is on the move, and that too not in a familiar environment. So, tracking of asset and making sure that it reaches the destination, say at your it is a retailer shop or a distributor, it reaches safely. Let's say that you are talking about a warehouse which is storing medicine, which is temperature. You can say that if a proper temperature is not maintained, that medicine is going to get damaged. So
Mm-hmm.
in that case, what do you need to do? You need to track the temperature of your asset, one thing, right? Apart from that, you need to know where your truck are moving. So you need to involve location here a lot. And doing that everything on your truck will involve attaching or putting an IoT device onto it. So that is basically, again, it comes to IoT, right? You create an IoT device.
I see how you are bringing it into an IoT world for sure, and I don't blame you, because I love your focus on that. Actually, I really appreciate that use case scenario where it's, people think asset tracking is just as simple as just knowing where it is on a map, but obviously it can be even more than that. The dimensions of temperature, as you mentioned, could be a factor. Won't be a factor in this series, but I'm glad that you mentioned that for things that are sensitive like that, that's what you would need to do.
Yeah.
So another component to supply chain is retail, and this can take on many faces, right? Retail can be a brick and mortar. Retail could also be online, but it's going to be the premise is basically how are you going to obtain what you need ultimately. This is usually related to one of the other components that's going to be shown later, and that's consumer. But how do they ultimately get what they need? And one of the ways, of course, we'll just put it in this generic term of retail, which can be a number of things. Like I said, online, brick and mortar. However, whatever is the process by which they engage this entity in order to obtain what they need. So that's also a part of supply chain. And this is the part that I was wondering, if you compare it to the one right above it, warehouses, why are these two separate? A warehouse could
Mhm.
be, again, a warehouse of parts, not necessarily a warehouse of products, or it could be both. But distribution centers typically are strategically placed in order to, you know, uh, make more efficient the transportation of things. However, I would like your comment on that. Would you say that warehouses and distribution centers, in the description you gave before, are they similar or are they different to you?
So I think it depends in the scenario, right? It is contextual. So in some places, warehouses could be the distribution centers also. In other cases, they has to be different, where warehouses are storing huge chunk of assets, and distribution center is closer to the your actual buyers
Mhm.
or your retails. So that depends on the region, I think.
Yeah. And here's what's interesting. In some scenarios, a retail and a distribution center could also be the same, right?
Yeah.
So that's why this is all an interesting look, because one definition doesn't always cut it for every scenario. There could be some
True.
combinations, or different. One entity might wear multiple hats, is a good way to say it. So it
Totally.
could be possible that a retail place is also the warehouse and the distribution center. It could be. So
So basically, what we are talking about, that supply chain could be a hybrid structure depending on what the enterprise or customer wants. They can build it according to placing their own blocks in a different way, right?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then, of course, that one of the most important aspects of supply chain is, what's the point of a supply chain if there isn't the end user or that consumer that is ultimately doing the procurement of, and is getting the delivery of this product or service. And so, and especially nowadays, let's face it, especially now more than ever, we're seeing so much delivery being done, and there is. It's not to say that brick and mortar is going away, but it means that especially nowadays, people might be opting to do more deliveries, right? And perhaps that may stick. There may be, when things get better, using positive outcome, positive thinking here, when they get better, then of course we may see that there are some that kind of got adjusted to this whole, hey, I like having things just kind of delivered. And
Yeah,
it's possible.
I think companies have evolved because of the scenario that we are facing right now, and they are kind of hit the right spots here, right? They are working very well. When I see the online ordering or delivery system, they have improved amazingly, to be honest, in few months.
I agree with you. Some of the things that I've noticed on a local level here in Arizona where I live, and also just from others that I've chatted with and talked to, it seems like those ones that were needing that edge, like, or it's almost survival, right? Out of survival, they had to
Yeah,
figure out something, yet that survival tactic actually produced a desirable outcome. And all of this, as you said, kind of boils down into this evolution of supply chain that we're seeing these days. So
true.
I love seeing that kind of creativity. I'm not loving why, but at least I'm loving that it is happening, and that's a really good thing.
True. And one more thing, when I see the structure now, I can see from the technical perspective that there are a lot of things which can be done. For example, you can include ERP here, enterprise resource planning softwares,
Yeah.
right, which can completely manage this SCM, supply chain management. Apart from that, one more thing, technology that could play a big role here is machine learning and AI, where instead of involving too many humans or too many of us, we can simply rely on machine doing that task for us, especially the critical thinking or some stress management here. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because one of the goals, of course, of supply chain management is to look for those efficiencies, and usually the bottleneck is a person, right? And in
yeah.
fact, we even have an ebook that's downloadable on here.com. If you were to do a search on here.com for supply chain, one of the things you'll find is that you could download an ebook, and one of the things that supply chain ebook talks about is the fact that some of the bottlenecks are even just how much of this process is still done in paper. So clearly, the more we can get from that world to something more digital and automated, and of course, perhaps even using AI or machine learning, all the better.
Yeah, makes sense. Actually, there are a lot of scope of new age technologies here in supply chain.
Yeah, there is. And it's fun for us because, of course, at here, we have a lot of services that can help with that. However, I do want to ask real quickly, is there any questions so far in the Twitch stream? Does anybody have any
Uh,
comments?
no, nothing right now. Everybody's happy that Peter is back, and we are very much happy for that.
Of course. Yeah. It makes me quite happy to not worry. It really is a beautiful thing. Okay, so now that we've talked about supply chain overall as a concept, I want to get to this next concept within a concept, and that is the last mile. Have you heard of this term before, Vidhan? The last mile?
To be honest, I have heard it a lot, but I'm not sure exactly what it is, what it means, because I think it's contextual, right?
Yeah, well, so yeah, when I first heard it, of course, I think that a lot of times I take things very literally. So I'm thinking, what is the big deal with the final mile? Why couldn't it be the last kilometer? What was this? What was the significance of this distance of? And then I realized, of course, that has nothing. It really has nothing to do with it. What it really refers to is that it's about the final stages. Remember, supply chain is all about a sequence of processes. That was part of that definition in the dictionary. And one of the processes is the delivery of said product or service to its final destination. And in the cases that we'll be considering, that will be to the consumer, the one who's actually going to end up with it. So uh, final destination. So from whatever point it's at, a distribution center, a retail location, a warehouse, wherever that is, if the very next stop from that point is to the final destination, that final journey is known as the last mile. Now,
Okay.
that's why you see a subset of services on the screen. They're all from the previous one, from supply chain, but you could see that it's a narrowed scope because now we're not dealing with suppliers. We don't need to assemble things at this. This is all about you getting to the last destination. The only time that could be an interesting thing, which would probably be more of a service, is if you were having something delivered that is getting assembled right in your home, right? Which can
Yeah.
happen. But that would be more of a service, really. That's not so much about a supplier or manufacturing. That's just the service of, doing something on site to make sure you have that product great. But now that we have an understanding of the last mile, do you have any thoughts or comments or questions about the last mile?
So there are no queries on last mile, but I think everybody wants to see your puppy, Michael. So
That is,
everybody seems excited.
oh my goodness, that is so crazy. Sure, sure. So I think we're going to be able to show. Uh, I don't know if it's on the screen, but Peter apparently is showing something that is. Oh, cool. Okay, very nice. So
Oh,
that's it. Let
that's
me
nice.
let me know when it's no longer on the screen.
You need to tell something about the puppy. Few likes.
Oh,
You
he
got
said that's actually getting likes. Who cares about supply chain? Talk about the puppy. Okay. Okay. So Vidhan, here's the thing. The reason why I'm putting the last mile as something to talk about is just because, hey, let's face it, the rest of this series is really going to be a little bit more focused on that part of the journey. So
okay.
so the things that we're going to build technically are really going to be, I would say, the primary focus will be on the last mile. It doesn't mean that other parts won't fit in, but it will be the primary focus. So, with that stated, I do want to talk about this quote. And this is a quote that was from that ebook that, again, can be downloaded from our website, here.com. This CEO of Leogistics says transparency for me is one of the most critical success factors for an integrated supply chain because without transparency, you will not be able to manage your processes. So I found that to be a very important statement that resonated with me because I was thinking about the fact that without transparency, that's where things start to break down. If you're in the dark, if something is black boxed, or you're not aware of every
Mhm.
step, or have access to that, that could be damaging, or clearly inefficient to a supply chain. So, do you have any thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, I'm curious to know how are we going to integrate supply chain with AWS and here from here.
So you're like, just get to the point. Just talk about, the technology. So absolutely, the technologies are going to be the answer to this transparency. So
Mhm.
let's first, right before we get to the technology, let's kind of talk a little bit about the scenario that's going to be unfolding, or these use cases that are going to be unfolding over this series of supply chain. There's going to be a company, and I've been tasked with this challenge to name this company, and I have yet to come up with a good name. Wouldn't it be awesome if one of the persons that's watching this episode actually provided a good name? Here's the premise of the company. It is the ultimate delivery company, meaning you need something from wherever, you know, it's going to deliver it to you. And an example of that now is like some places, you might go to some retail store and they may have their own delivery people. We know that there's delivery services out there now, like DoorDash or Grubhub, or that will
Mhm.
deliver food. But imagine this ultimate delivery service that basically says, "You need it, we'll get it to you." So that's this ultimate delivery service. That's what the company is, and
Okay.
transparency to all activities going on, which means the asset tracking, all the points of references, they will have access to everything that is happening at any time. So that's one component of what we're going to see built over this series. The other one is called distribution centers. And the reason why distribution centers is important is because, by the way, this could also be slash retail, from the perspective
Okay.
of, if it's a retail store where the product ultimately is at, then that's where we have to go to pick it up. But so we're just giving it this generic term of distribution center, which ultimately means this is where the product currently resides. So the delivery service will need to go to one of these distribution centers in order to pick up the product. And then, of course, finally, we have this consumer piece, and that is the final destination of where something is going to get delivered, where the product is ultimately going to be, and they are going to have transparency to all the activity that's related just to their own order, right?
Okay.
They're not going to see what other orders are going on. They don't care. They just want to know what's the stages of their own order. And an example of that, again, is like if you use a food delivery service, you may be interested, especially the hungrier you are, the more interested you are in looking and saying, how long is it going to be before my food gets here? And
Yeah.
and you really monitor that. Like you're like, okay, it says 10 minutes. I hope it's real. I hope it doesn't pull some weird 10-minute rule, but it's real.
Yes, I did that a lot. I ordered a lot of online food, even in the COVID situation, actually. So
Yeah,
I
I
did
think
that.
I'm putting someone through college right now with all my food delivery stuff because I've spent so much money on food delivery. But I want to support the economy any way I can. That's my justification.
That is also my justification from now
Yeah.
on, also.
Okay. So now, of course, these are three static things, right? The company, the distribution center, and the consumer. But the things, and you mentioned this before, the things that are fluid, the things that move around, the things that are not, the things that need to be tracked, that's going to be the product, and it's going to be through transportation of the product. So throughout this entire series, we're also going to be looking at how we track the product, and how the transportation plays a role, and how we can make the transportation efficient to the destinations that it needs to go to. And so that's kind of uh, a small overview of the business use case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what I understood till now from your this slide is that we have three major components which are playing a role in supply chain, which are company, where your product is getting originated. Then you have distributors or distribution centers slash retail centers, where your product or asset is going to be stored for further distribution among the consumers. And then finally, your other endpoint is your consumers. And doing all this, we have to make sure that everything reaches quickly and efficiently, right?
Yes, you had everything correct. I'm going to just make one minor revision. In this example, the product does not originate with the company. Just like in a
Okay.
food delivery service, the food delivery service itself did not make the food, they're just the delivery mechanism. So in
Oh,
this example, the ultimate delivery service company is not making the product, they're just responsible for transporting it and getting it to its final destination. And and again, if anyone has a very cool name, I'm already going to say I'm not going to call it anything puppy related. It is it needs to be like the ultimate like delivery service, you know. So and until I can think of a better name, it's just going to be called Ultimate Delivery Service. But there's got to be something better than that.
so Shruti suggested Canali. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Cannoli?
Canali Delivery Services.
Yeah, it's not going to be cannoli. although
Okay.
although it's a tasty, attractive name, it's not going to be cannoli. Cannoli is the name of my dog, so that's why
Okay.
she's mentioning that.
Okay. So for everybody, Canali is the name of Michael's dog. And Michael is saying that you should name it as Guy with a pickup truck. Or, yeah, something like
Okay,
that.
yeah, that's clever. Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit. I'm going to go into this. This is Vidhan's world, right? This is where Vidhan lives. You know, the Internet of Things. The reason why this is being mentioned, I'm going to give my little speech on IoT, and then Vidhan, I want you to offer your comments. But ultimately, we're able to successfully provide this transparency through all this technology. And one of the major reasons why is we're going to be using throughout, I can't imagine any episode from this point forward where IoT, AWS IoT is not used at least once or many times, because it is the means by which all of these different components are going to be connected to one another. So I just gave like a business perspective view, but I also want to get your perspective on just IoT in general, Vidhan.
Okay, so if you ask me about what IoT is, so first of all, it's a big technology, and every other technology can come under this technology. You talk about cloud computing, you talk about machine learning, you talk about augmented reality, virtual reality, you talk about data science, you talk about blockchain, you talk about digital transformation. All these technologies that I'm talking about, they everything can come under one umbrella, which is IoT, Internet of Things. And what it is basically connecting devices. We have been doing this for a very long time, machine to machine communication. But what has changed is now these machines are communicating intelligently, right? They are aware about their environment, and then being self aware, they are communicating the contextual data which is around them to other machine, and from that the data is getting transformed into what we call insight or wisdom. And that is what IoT is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought in that extra context. And I will have to say, for a certainty, the use of IoT in this series is mostly going to be limited to messaging, using topic-based messaging approach. But it is exciting to think of the possibilities with IoT, especially whether it's at the edge device level or at some central processing area where there's more intelligence being done. I think it's fantastic. I'm glad you brought that extra context into it. But just for everyone that's following this series on supply chain, it's mostly going to be that messaging protocol between the devices or the parties that are involved, and how we'll accomplish the asset tracking and the transparency. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this. So this is just a very simple technical overview. So we're using AWS for processing with Lambdas. We're also using AWS IoT, as we've mentioned. We have a number of our own APIs that we're going to be utilizing within the overall architecture. And then on the other side, we have our clients, whether you use a phone or you use a desktop, all of the clients are going to essentially be using our JavaScript API. So for simplification of this whole journey, I'm not introducing like SDKs and things like that because I think that they can have their own series, because they are their own thing. But the assumption would be that most of the viewers are familiar with JavaScript, and therefore there's going to be a lot of JavaScript involved with the coding here. So, and just to accent that point, I just want to say that's why I have this here to say all the clients will essentially be websites that are getting their location intelligent data from our APIs. And so even the field devices, right, in the scenario, whether it's the driver, whether it's the consumer, whether it's the administrative offices of the company, the ultimate, they're all going to have web clients. So I'm just providing that as and we could still use AWS IoT with those thin clients.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to start winding down a little bit in terms of like, that's some of the things to start expecting. But now I want to start talking about if you are interested in, following along. And when I say that, this is not going to be a step-by-step tutorial. We may see something evolve from this series that will become a step-by-step tutorial, but what we're going to see is we're going to get glimpses into how to do some functional use cases each time we have an episode. But if you're interested in kind of like dabbling into some of the concepts that we're into, then you will, one, need to have an AWS account. So that means you will have to have your own, developer account at aws.amazon.com. So that's one. And then also, this entire thing is going to be heavily, it's in AWS, but it's also very location centric. So much of the behavior is going to be from our APIs. So in order for that to happen, you will also need to set up a developer account at developer.here.com. Now, with regard to the AWS console and setting up an account there, you will need to do your own due diligence to make sure and choose pricing plans and the kind of account type that makes sense for you. They have starter type accounts. But with regard to our account, which we can speak more to because I don't represent Amazon, I represent here. When you sign up for your free account with a freemium account, then we don't even ask you for a credit card up front. You could just log in, sign up. Takes it can take less than a minute if you're a fast typer. So it's not a hard process, and you'll be granted up to 250,000 transactions a month for free. And then if you start to build your stuff, then it goes beyond that. Then there's other models. But just want to say, to get started, it's really those two accounts that you would need. In order to, at least if you wanted to dabble, or like I said, it's not a step-by-step tutorial, but if you see something you're like, I want to test that theory out, then that's something that we will be able to demonstrate or show in upcoming episodes that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see and to learn a lot of things about supply chain, especially from your experience on working with AWS.
I think it's going to be fun. And you know what? We can return to like the studio mode.
And we have a query, Michael.
Oh, please.
So Sina is asking, has Cannoli signed up for a free account yet?
Has Cannoli signed up for a free account? Oh my goodness. These are not, I can tell you, none of the questions today have aligned to anything I was expecting.
Okay. Is it possible for plausible or possible?
I would say do not sign your pets up for a free account ad here. That is not what it's meant for.
Why not? If they can have Instagram account, they can have Facebook account. Why not a developer's account?
I can't lie. He does have an Instagram account, but I don't think he's going to have a developer account. Uh, so, are we? I forgot to ask. Are we like in that studio mode right now? Is the no?
Nope.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's go. So I'm talking to the voice in my head. This is something I did in previous. Okay, so yes, Vidhan, I think it's going to be exciting. Is there any other questions that are not related to a dog?
Uh, so I, so I would like to know, like, what are we planning, or what are we going to do in the coming episodes? That is something
Excellent.
that everybody might be thinking about.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, basically, there's going to be the series is going to go into a number of those major use cases. So I could tell you the very next episode in this series is going to be all about transportation. It's literally
Okay.
going to be just about setting up the transportation piece. And then another episode that happens after that is going to be about the retail perspective. So, how does the consumer actually procure the product and make that initial request? And then there's also going to be another episode that focuses entirely on the consumer's perspective of having that product once it's ordered delivered to them. And then the final episode of the series, and I say final, which would mean the final planned episode, there could be some scope creep that there may be another one, but if not, the final episode is going to go into the administrative view of the ultimate delivery service. So they get the full view spectrum. So we're building the little pieces and parts as we go, and then ultimately we'll see this master view of everything that's happening within the company, the delivery service company, as opposed to the small pieces that we'll be seeing up until then. So that's kind of like a sneak peek or a little preview of all the things that we're going to be doing. And then as far as technologies are concerned, AWS IoT for sure. We're going to see that well, not all of our APIs, but many of our APIs. And I'll even introduce this and say, with a clever approach to how to do some things for notifications, for understanding how to do asset tracking. So it's something that you may find interesting to use in some of your projects, whether they're supply chain related or not. So some tips and tricks along the way with how to accomplish some tasks. But I would also like to ask the same question of you, Vidhan, because I know in another week, our roles will be switched and you're going to be primarily driving the whole IoT series. So can you give us a
Yeah.
preview of what that's going to be like?
Okay. So in IoT, what we are going to do is we are going to create a complete ecosystem from one end to another. That is, we are going to create an IoT device. We are going to send data to a gateway, IoT gateway. Then we are going to send the data to the cloud. That is going to be AWS, of course. And we are going to use the service called AWS IoT. And from there, we are going to send it to the end user, or we are going to create a user application. And we'll have a total end-to-end communication from device, gateway, cloud to user,
That
to and
sounds
fro.
awesome. That sounds very good. And are these virtual? I mean, for the sake of these episodes, I'm just curious, are these virtual devices or will you be introducing any real devices?
So I have with me Raspberry Pi. So I'll be using that. I have with me Node MCU with GPS sensor, and probably I'll attach a temperature sensor. We'll be using that. And other device that I'll be using is the laptop to show the user interface.
I
So yeah,
love that. I'm also fascinated to see how you're going to change the temperature on these episodes. So it'll be interesting to see what you do.
I'll show it on the camera, the device.
That's good.
I found it.
That's going to be fun. Okay, so let me do like a little brief summary here. We in this episode we talked about architecture, talked about some supply chain concepts, kind of gave an overview of what there is to on the in the near future, and also some of the technologies that we're going to be using. I want to. There's something. Is there a question?
Yeah. So there's one query from Kubera speaking, and the query is, say if somebody wants to dabble into supply chain and they want to get into this universe and they want to only target a certain part of it and they want to create something out of it, some application. So is there any specific prerequisites or any material that they can refer to?
So I would say at this point, there's no like materials that I'm going to be providing or to point to, other than the fact that there is going to be a forthcoming blog from this episode that will probably list some things that will be beneficial for someone who wants to get started with supply chain. It's just that that blog won't probably happen until next week. But it will reference this episode, and it's also going to reference some resources for people to get started.
So watch out for the blog from Michael Kubera speaking.
Thanks for the shameful plug, Shruti. I appreciate that. Okay, so I want to also give a little bit of a schedule. All the times that I'm going to mention are Pacific time. Okay, so you'll have to do the math in your head or go to some site that will do the translation of time for you. But tomorrow we will have a home office hours at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. 1 week from today, we start off our AWS Connections IoT series starring Vidhan, and that will start Pacific time 7:30 a.m. And then 2 weeks from today, we are going to get into the next part of this AWS Connections supply chain series with the focus on transportation. So hopefully you will stay tuned for all of those episodes. They all have something unique to offer. And before we say our final farewell, do you have anything else to add, Vidhan?
Just that I'm looking forward to streamings. Got to learn a lot of things and looking out for what is there in the future with supply chain and IoT.
Absolutely. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to the IoT series. Not only will I be watching it, I will be with you, and I'm so excited that I'll be your co-host. So I look forward to that. Thank you, everyone, for watching today's episode. And again, we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.